for tuning in to Escape the Mind Reviews. My name is Brandon, and I am joined by the Soulless Samurai, and we are here tonight to discuss Castle Rock Episode 5, The Laughing Place. How we doing tonight, Soulless?
Doing well. How's it going, bud?
It is going very well. I want to make sure everybody out there hits that like button. Make sure you subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot, especially with us being a starting off channel and such late point in the game of YouTube as a overall thing. Just help us out a little bit. If you see that like button, it's free. Click on it. Give it a little love. It gives us a lot of love, and we appreciate it.
Yeah. And we feel that love and appreciate the support.
So Castle Rock Episode 5, The Laughing Place. Are you excited to get into this episode? I think for me, this was probably one of the most visceral episodes we've gotten up to this point. It definitely hit home. It was probably the hardest one for me to watch up to this point. So are you happy to get into the review?
I really am. When I watched it, I just couldn't wait to talk about it. As I told a friend of mine, it's a jaw dropper.
For sure. Yes. Good way to put it. So the episode starts off with Anne as a small child, and you can see that she's having some issues reading in class. She's a bit dyslexic, rubbing her words together. I would only imagine that it's a really traumatic thing for kids to have to deal with. I luckily didn't have that to where I have to kind of decipher what I read. But man, I'd have to imagine that sucks.
Yeah, that really has to be tough. Anybody who like deals with dyslexia is already at a handicap to try to excel in school.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting too that you get to see how even at that age she's coming up with things to like put in its place to try to cover. Like she's lying about what's on the page to try to cover up for the fact that she can't read it. So even as being that small, you can see that when she's in a jam, she can lie to get her way out of it. She'll do whatever she has to do to try to get her way through it.
Yeah, I wonder if that's what sharpened her skills.
So shortly after that, we meet her parents for the first time. You get to hear some interesting lingo that gets thrown around, words like mental midget, and this place is a sewer. And then, of course, the lovely Christmas.
Yes. Yep.
I think that scene, like in a nutshell, really tells you who her parents are.
Yeah, it definitely sets the stage.
You get the impression very quickly that unfortunately this girl did not have a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the first thing her dad does is defend her, which as a father is probably normal, but he just rails against the school.
Yeah.
And how it's run and what they're teaching, like censorship and PC generation in particular.
And they were redoing the Brer Rabbit stories as Brad Rabbit, and he was a little put off by the political correctness of it, of them changing the story around to make it so that it seemed like everybody liked each other instead of Brer Fox trying to eat Brer Rabbit, things like that.
Yeah, like I said before, we don't talk about that era of Disney.
Yep, that's right. We're going to move on. So Anne's parents decide to take over her education. You kind of see them have a bit of a fight about it in the car, and her mom's asking her dad whether or not he can handle it because he's failed at things in the past, and she doesn't want their daughter to end up being another one of those failures.
Yes. One thing I want to point out too, the principal or guidance counselor that they're talking to clearly says that she shows pathological behavior.
Oh, that's right. They said it's the third incident.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, because there's another one coming up in a minute, but it makes you wonder what those other ones were, because we just saw the one.
Right.
So
yeah.
I wonder if those other ones were similar to that, where she was just kind of like fibbing, like stretching the truth. Because it's pretty innocent compared to what we're about to get into in a few minutes.
Right.
It makes you wonder if it started off as in an innocent way, but people didn't recognize that. They assumed malcontent, and then that just shaped her in a way. Like,
yeah, gotcha.
Granted, her parents already put her very far behind the ball, but like if society as a whole didn't give her a chance as well, then again, that's part of the reason why I feel like she had it out from the beginning. Like her ability to make it out of the situation a normal person was pretty slim.
Yes.
So Anne's dad basically has the idea that he's going to have her type up his book that he's writing as a way to learn how to read and write, which isn't a bad idea.
Yeah. Do you think that the typewriter sounds that we've heard in other episodes when she starts losing a little, or because of that?
Yeah, that's a good point. That could be. I mean, he does mention that he loves the typewriter and he just the
Hmm.
feel of it, and that's kind of helps to drive his creative ability. So yeah, I totally think that that might have something to do with him for sure.
Hmm.
One of the things I made a note of is it did seem to me that the relationship between Anne and her dad, even though we find out later that he has his own, litany of problems, that it seemed to be a nice relationship. They seem to understand each other. They seem to, at this point, it seems like the mom's really the rough edge, if you will. Like, I don't want to put
Yeah.
all of it on her because they both have their problems. But in the beginning, it seemed like the mom that was driving the crazy train.
Yes, you can tell she's a little unstable. And I mean, he even says to Annie that he's her number one fan
Which
at
is a
one point.
reoccurring theme, right?
Yeah, and that gets brought up multiple times by Annie herself, and talking to Joy and whatnot.
And wasn't
It's
that in Misery too? Didn't Kathy Bates' character say that to the writer?
Yes, yep. It's really interesting to meet Anne's parents at this point, because now you're seeing these things that she's parroting or saying herself, and you're like, that's where it comes from.
I mean, kids are such impressionable things.
Hmm.
And then think about that child developing in a house with people who have mental disabilities or mental instabilities. Like those patterns
Hmm.
even of behavior would have to kind of imprint on them as they develop.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we all get that a little bit, but this is definitely to an extreme.
Yeah, for sure. And
Relatable.
I think you see that pretty quickly when the scene moves forward with the next scene with when she becomes a teen and she's reading a book with her dad's book, and they're talking about like complicated people and complicated characters, and Anne says to him like, hey, I think there isn't complicated people. There's either good people or bad people, and bad people deserve to be punished.
She says specifically, Mom says you're either good or bad.
So clearly, those patterns have started to develop in her and her judgment of what's good and what's bad.
Right. Yeah, everything's black and white.
And I think that's something that her dad tried to address at that point. But it's really tough when you have such a strong impression of something to have that, like, you're not old enough to have a idea that people have a different sense of opinion on certain things and that there's
Yeah.
nuance to those opinions.
Right. Well, she only has two at this point. I mean, she's homeschooled. So
Exactly.
she's got mom's views and dad's views.
And they did drop that, for Anne, it's not that she's totally struggling in all areas. She's good at math, but
Hmm.
she's definitely struggling when it comes to reading. And you can hear even as a teen that she's reading out loud her dad's writing, that she's struggling pretty good to try to get through the words and the sentences at that point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, which could just 100% be a learning disability. It just could be
Sure.
dyslexia, because she seems really swift in every other regard.
So, I mean, her parents were also going to have trouble because it's not like I know people that grew up with learning disabilities, and if they didn't find like that specific teacher to reach them, then they weren't able to essentially break through. And then once
Mm.
they found that person, then they were able to really make things happen for them.
Ah,
So I feel like it's tough because you have to have those special things about you that allow you to find a way to communicate to those people,
right.
where I
Yeah.
feel like that's not something that her parents were equipped to be able to do. It's, they tried. It's not like
Hmm.
they didn't try. It's not like her dad didn't give effort from what we could tell, but it's not like
Yeah.
he was equipped to reach through and really figure out what would allow her to work through that learning difficulty.
Well, I mean, he did seem to be able to teach her how to read. I
And right, I mean, she was
Yeah.
very good at typing and things, and that is a life skill.
Granted, he was using her for child labor, but she seemed to make some progress.
Yeah. So Anne's mom is doubtful of her father's ability to teach Anne and break through that learning disability. So she makes Anne read out loud in front of her, and Anne struggles through it. And so Anne's mom basically decides to take over Anne's teaching, and that her father is no longer going to supervise over the learning.
Did you catch right at the beginning of that scene when she was talking to her father? He's like, "You should go help your mom." She's helping her mom carry groceries in, and she walks back into that conversation that they're having. about her. And as she's walking in, she goes, "So, Mom, did we go back to alphabetical order in the pantry?" So you get a little bit of that compulsion
Yeah.
that her mom has there.
Well, I mean, she mentions before that like she would essentially make a home so much and so diligently that it would say uncle. So
Yeah.
I think that goes to show you that she would do it whether you wanted it to happen or not.
Mhm.
So the parents argue that Carl, who's Anne's dad, has had basically 10 years to finish his book, but hasn't been able to finish it. And that basically he's
So you're
failed.
gonna finish that novel?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that episode of Family Guy. That's hilarious. So the parents are kind of going back and forth about the dad's failures. And in the next scene, we kind of see Anne's mom cleaning her teeth, which is probably my least favorite part of the episode, other than the one part that comes at the end.
Ooh, yeah, at least some of the more gruesome stuff happens kind of quick. That was just long and drawn out, like being in a dentist chair.
The sounds in that scene are just make your skin crawl. There's a few times that I feel like this episode played very close attention to how things sounded.
And
yeah. It just made it that much more intense. So while Anne's mom's cleaning her teeth, she's basically telling her that she's going to take over for all the learning and that Anne's going to be so much better for it than where she's at now. And that she just needs to make sure that Anne, does the best that she can to not be stagnant in her life, which is kind of hearkening back to the conversation we heard before with Anne to Joy saying like, you need to not settle for things in your life. So now we know where this was embedded in her mind.
Yeah. A couple things really stuck with me in this, like quotes from her mom. She tells her at one point to leave this filthy place. And
the word filthy reoccurs a lot. It's even in her dad's book.
Right, in the Ravening Angel.
Yeah.
Yeah. She tells her at one point there's nothing dirtier than a human mouth while she's cleaning her mouth. She uses the term little love at one point, and the one that really just kind of sticks is the rock creeps from the back.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting when you talk about the compulsions and the cleanliness and her obsessing about the cleanliness of the mouth, that must have extended then to their house. And then that makes you wonder how much that obsessive compulsiveness was with everything that she did and how much that drove her to be how she was. I wonder, because she's a nurse, she has to have some idea of the idiosyncrasies that her mind has. I mean, you and I are not super old in our lives, but yet we have ideas of our foibles and where we struggle. So, I mean, of course, them being adults, I think would have some sense of that, even with mental instability.
Yeah. But there's also the fact that like being in that profession, she's probably also really concerned about germs and cleanliness.
True.
And that kind of thing. And you can really see that Anne gets, her penchant for cleaning and her compulsion from her mom.
Yeah, I mean, we saw in the first episode after she took down Ace with the ice cream scoop that she was like diligently scrubbing all of the floors and everything to make sure like she did so good she couldn't even find that she had killed someone thereafter.
I thought it was funny that she even made sure to say that. Like, I was looking for evidence, but I cleaned it all up too well.
Yeah. So we
brush your shoulder off.
Yeah, there you go. We flash forward to see Joy continuing reading the Ravening Angel book, but in real time. And so we obviously know at this point that that book came from Anne's dad. We don't really know where the box came from, really, like from the first scene, but we have a pretty good idea of at least now what that means.
Right.
So we see after that Abdi needs to go somewhere down to the construction site, and he decides not to leave Joy alone at home. When he goes to the construction site, I think we got one of the parts of the episode that made my skin crawl the most, because you see Joy in the car, and then slowly behind Joy, where the camera angle is, you start to see Anne kind of waddle into frame and then make her way towards the car. Like, the whole time I'm like, no, like I just wanted Joy to like recognize that she was there. Like, did she lose it so much that she's come back to kill her at this point? Or is she just trying to like find her daughter and talk to her?
Yeah, because she just has that ambling, crazy gait.
It's so weird that someone's walk could freak you out so much.
I know, man. It's very disconcerting.
So they cut to a scene where it appears that Anne and Joy have made a deal that Joy's going to talk to Anne in the car, and Abdi's going to sit outside of the car and basically oversee the situation.
Right.
So Anne tells Joy that, hey, I hit a bad patch, but I'm through it now. I promise I'm not going to hurt you. But Joy is basically not having it. And she says, look, you need to talk to somebody. And then when Anne kind of diverts away from that, she says, look, I want to know who my dad is. And she's like, look, I talked to you about this, that you're safer not knowing who he is. And then Joy's like, look, then I'm done talking to you.
Yeah. And then Abdi kicks her out of the car. Joy was just tired of her shit.
We flash back again to the past where we see Anne's mom has hired her a new teacher, and we meet Rita for the first time. We see pretty quickly that Rita is pretty good at her job as far as trying to reach kids. She kind of gets mom out of the room so that way she can talk to Anne one-on-one.
Yeah, just like you were saying, she found a way to reach her pretty quickly and realized what maybe one of the obstacles is and quickly got mom out of the room.
Yeah, exactly. She could totally tell that mom was a large obstacle to have to overcome for everybody in the house, for sure.
Yes.
So Rita offers Anne a copy of Pinocchio and kind of gets Anne's attention because she mentions that Pinocchio's lies have consequences, that they burn his feet and different things of that nature, so that if he does things that, bad people do, they get punished.
Yeah, there's going to be consequences. I feel like Anne learns how to weave a web of lies from her dad. She definitely has a grasp on fiction and stuff through that, and you kind of see it in this scene. And
do you think that she does though?
I don't. And her creativity is
I don't mean to jump ahead because but I feel like it'll work well for the discussion point. Anne in the end doesn't seem to recognize what character the dad is portraying himself as. She thinks he's a different character than he really actually wrote himself as in the book.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
So
You're right about that.
So I don't think that she necessarily had total grasp over the fact of that he was writing his life or his own thoughts into that book.
Okay.
Or if she did, she had them distorted and thinking that they were a different person than whom his thoughts were really being driven through.
Well, she says at one point that she's helping her dad with the book, and she's like, sometimes he gets lost and I help him get back to it. And she says, I'm not good with words, but I understand how stories work. So I feel like she's really good at that narrative kind of thing. And yeah, just weaving that web.
She understands that you have to have people that you need to root for and people that you need to root against. So the good versus evil battle.
Does not get complex characters, though.
No, not very much. So we can see pretty quickly that Rita's spending a lot of time with Anne, and her reading is improving vastly in a very short amount of time. We can also see that there's some struggles about dealing with those patterns again, because Anne doesn't like that Pinocchio finds redemption at the end of the story and becomes a real boy. She feels that a liar doesn't deserve redemption and that they should have killed him at the end, which Rita basically says that the author's original ending had him being killed, but that they took it out and they changed it because the editor thought that kids would be scared. And Anne's like, they should be scared. They should learn that these things have consequences.
Yeah, which you can kind of tell too. Rita's taken aback and realizes that Anne might be a little pathological.
Well, she says, did your mom tell you that?
Yes.
So it's tough because I wonder, when you're in that position, because you don't want to, you're not trying to overstep their parents' morals. It's not your job to teach them morality. It's your job to teach them how to read.
Yeah.
But in the same respect, that's a pretty uncomfortable thing. Clearly that person doesn't have what would be a normal sense of those things.
Yeah. Yep.
In the next part, I thought it was interesting because Anne's dad kind of overhears what's going on, and he kind of butts in and asks Anne to leave. And he tells the teacher that he basically doesn't really have faith in her choices of the books that she's having Anne read. And Rita answers him and gives him a pretty good answer. But the only part of it that he gives a crap about is the part where she says that his book is good.
Yeah, yeah, that was all he caught.
So
So you like that?
yeah. Oh, so that's a good book. You like that? Would you read that book? So Rita continues to teach Anne, spending seemingly day and night with her. You see her even like falling asleep on the couch while Anne's trying to read. So
Yeah, they get really close.
it seems that she's really going above and beyond to make sure that she gets through to her GED for sure. So after a long montage of time goes by, we can see that Rita's now pregnant with her own baby. So first question,
I
as
hope it's
soon as
hers.
that comes up, is that Joy or is that an unrelated character?
Yeah, yeah. And when Anne even asks her where the father is, and Rita says it's complicated.
Yeah, exactly. And it does appear that Anne's about the same age as she was in the first episode of the season. So it seems like the timing's about right for things to go down for when she gets covered in blood.
Shit's about to go down.
So Anne asks whether the dad, like you had mentioned, when Rita says that it's complicated, she goes, it's not complicated. He's either good or bad, but you're
Yeah.
good. And she specifically says that she thinks that Rita's a good person.
Yes.
And you can kind of tell when Rita's sitting on the couch that she's kind of trying to figure her way through that situation and like navigate that because she looks perplexed.
Yes, for sure.
So we see shortly afterwards that Anne's mom is definitely deteriorating. She feels that Anne is going to basically settle in life, and that's because that's what she did with Anne's dad. And
she's also drinking
pretty heavily, yeah. And we can see at this point that it looks like she's kind of just spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in the first part of the episode, you can tell that even though inwardly and what comes out of her mouth, you can tell that she's a little bit Looney Tunes, but like just from appearances, she looks like a normal person. By this point in the episode, you can just by looking at her, you can tell something's wrong. Like her eyes have sunken in. She looks like she's not sleeping. Like she's talking to herself when Anne walks out of the room.
Yeah, 1,000-yard stare.
Yes, a great way to put it. So in the next scene, we can see that Carl's telling Anne that he's wrapped up his book and that he even has an interested publisher. He also tells Anne towards the end of his conversation that he needs to go away for a little while and that he's going to be moving out of the house.
Yeah, he compares himself to Annabelle, one of the characters in his novel. He describes her as somebody who's always wandering, always searching.
And I think that's kind of where they had the little bit, because Anne asked, like, I think Anne thought that he was the character that settles, and he was saying, no, he's like, that's not actually what I was at all. I was actually, the Annabelle character is more like me, the never ending search. And she said, well, what are you looking for? And he's like, that's kind of part of the never ending search, is you kind of don't even really know it until you find it.
Yeah, which, I mean, there's plenty of reasons that we think that she should be on the run at this point, but that also might be a reason that she is constantly searching for something new. I mean, it's something that her dad planted in her head.
Yeah, I mean, she did say to Joy that she's a mixture of her mom and dad. She's part settler, part wanderer.
Yeah.
Anne did ask her dad if it has to do with her as to why he's leaving, and he's pretty adamant that it's not. It's just between her mom and him, which I would imagine when you have a child that has some disabilities, that has to be a really hard conversation to make them understand, like, hey, in life, sometimes these things don't work out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough conversation, even in the best of circumstances.
Yeah, exactly.
But he does tell her that he's her number one fan.
Yep. Again. So we get that reoccurring theme again as well. So we flash forward to Anne at the Mellow Tiger, and Anne has decided to start drinking just like her mama.
Ooh, yeah, good point. And did you notice, like, everybody that walks by her or is just sitting in the bar is watching her?
It makes you wonder how much the word of everything is starting to get around Castle Rock, that because her face is cut up, so it could just be because of that. Maybe they're just wondering, like, damn, she get in a fight? Like, it could be that, or it could be that gossip is starting to get around town, or it could be that they're all body snatched and they're just trying to stare her down to figure out what she's doing.
Oh, shit, I didn't even think of that. Because, I mean, the Mellow Tiger, it just plays so heavily into the Stephen King lore and all that. Like, yeah, I didn't even think of that, man.
Yeah, because we saw, wasn't it the previous episode, the bartender got, if you will. So now pretty much anyone that's in that bar could be suspect.
Damn. Yeah.
So we flash back again to see Anne finding out that she has passed her test and she's got her GED now. So she's graduated high school. And what I thought was interesting is she's like, hey, Mom, I graduated. And then immediately goes and calls Dad.
Yep. I'm gonna go call dad. And mom was not happy with that.
I think she said something along the lines of he's got you right where he wants you.
Mm.
So after this is probably where the episode really starts to go off the rails. We see Anne and her mom go out for a drive. Anne tells her mom that she's going to the community college to be close to her dad, and it's also the same school where her dad went.
Right, it's his alma mater.
This, of course, upsets mom because to her, she's settling. She's accepting less now.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's saying, you know, this world is no place for a good woman. I'm on your side, Anne, and I'm the only one. And then she says, there are things that you don't know.
Yes.
And then she said that she gets back in the car and she locks the door. She backs up just slightly and then she drives into the river with both of them inside.
Yeah, she was saying some cryptic things about trying to make things right.
I know a way out.
Wipe things clean.
Yeah, that we can both get out clean.
Yeah.
So Anne does make it out of the car and she gets out, but mom does not. And we see in the next scene Anne and her dad at the mom's funeral. And we can see that some time has started to pass.
I think it was a couple months later.
I think they said it was 3 months.
Okay, yeah.
And he mentions that, you know, he shouldn't have gone away with her mom being in that condition. It just seemed at that point that like Anne has just lost it. You see her like after he's like, hey, I'm going to stay home now. She just downs that bottle of water or that cup of water and just doesn't say anything to him.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, the crazy is out now.
That's rough though. You're actually in the car that your mom drives into a river and you fight your way out and you live and she doesn't. That's oof.
Yeah.
Heavy, man.
So we also found out at that point that Anne never went to college. Her dad had mentioned like, hey, maybe we can fill out some admission forms, and just it never really happens. After about 3 months or so pass, Rita and the baby show up for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And you wonder, like, at first, was he doing it so that he could just bring someone that she liked to maybe get her to cheer up a bit?
Right. Yeah.
You don't really know like everything behind it, and maybe he's just trying to give Anne a sense of happiness.
Mm-hmm. Because she's obviously like really distraught the whole time.
So Anne is able to tell Rita that she passed her GED, and shortly after that, Anne's dad decides to tell her that he's actually the father of Rita's baby. Doesn't take very long before Anne puts together that that had to have happened before her mom drove the car into the river.
Yeah, she had trouble with reading, not with math.
So now she's going to feel betrayed because now that's maybe what drove her mom to being crazy is the fact that her dad was cheating on her.
Yeah, there's things you don't know.
So Anne grabs the knife off the table and she's like super distraught. Anne tells her to put the knife down. And I think there's a little bit of foreshadowing.
Rita tells her to put the knife down.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Rita tells her to put the knife down. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have a little bit of foreshadowing here because it's like you said, we kind of know where this is going now.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Ravening Angel box. We know that there's a baby that's now been introduced to this mix.
Evangeline.
I think you can put together at this point, the guy with the blood running up her face looks a lot like her dad.
Ah, yeah.
So this doesn't look like it's going to end well.
No, well, I mean, I think just based on everything, we know that things aren't going to go well.
Yeah. And you had pointed out when we were watching it that it almost seemed like at that point was the point when the crazy walk started.
Yes. At one point, you just see the eyes get bigger and she just snaps and turns into that person. Kudos to the actresses because Lizzie Kaplan has been amazing. And then to be able to cast somebody who looks very similar to her that can snap and have the same crazy eyes and the same crazy gait. I think her name is Ruby Cruz.
Yeah.
She did an amazing job this episode.
I was joking around with you when we were watching it and I said, you know, it makes you want to like check in on these people that can play these roles who can tap into the crazy. Like,
oh yeah.
Hey, do you need a hug?
Yeah.
Her dad basically kind of brushes it off and says that she'll be fine. And then they immediately, I think, make the absolute worst move and move the baby into the house and move Anne into the attic.
What could go wrong?
Why not just put the baby in the attic or put the baby in their room even and then not put anybody in the attic?
Yeah, right. There's also the scene where you see Anne looking out the window at Rita in almost the same way that Joy was looking out the window at Anne.
That's true. And we also see a couple of times that Anne is like staring down her dad as he's like on the typewriter.
Oh yeah, that was really creepy. Right when he finishes the novel, she's just standing outside with her hands by her side.
Yeah, super duper creepy.
Mm-hmm.
So they Rita and her dad kind of have a discussion about whether Anne should be on medication, and this is where we find out that her dad was able to finish his book because he stopped taking lithium.
Yeah, he says, Do you think I would almost be finished my novel if I was still on lithium?
So it goes to show you then that it wasn't just the mom, that both the dad and the mom were struggling with things. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not medically inclined, so I'm not sure if those things are like passed down from, parents to child. But I would imagine that if nothing else, growing up in that house would formulate those things, let alone if you're chemically imbalanced.
Yeah. That gene pool's a little shallow or a little tainted.
Another bad move on dad's part is basically having a super happy fun time with Rita. And doing it in a place where Anne could hear it. Maybe buy a white noise machine or put on some music or something, because not really the best thing to do for her mental state.
Yeah, and like watching it, I felt bad for her and was thinking about like what kind of an asshole he is for doing that. But at the same time, he is also grieving. He's also trying to deal with his own mental instability and all that stuff. So maybe he's not a jerk. It's weird how things manifest over time, I mean, he was obviously dealing with shit too.
I have a hard time not feeling like it's a little bit of a failure for him overlooking this so hard and not having more of a compassion for her having to go through this situation, because
it's pretty obvious that he doesn't care about anything but his book
and himself.
Yeah.
I mean, when he goes in to defend her to the teacher and then she says that she likes his book and he completely changes the story, he mostly cares about him.
Yeah.
So it's tough. I really feel for Anne a lot in this part, and you can kind of, for me, see how she would feel so abandoned.
Yeah, agreed, man. I mean, it was like 3 months is not a lot of time to go by after your mom passes for somebody to be moving into your house and taking your room.
Yep. And then to really hit the nail on the head, the scene after that, we see after her dad has finished his novel and he's kind of having a little bit of a party in the backyard, he's literally wearing the same clothes as the Bloodface guy in the first couple episodes. So I don't know how we're going to get there, but it's pretty clear that he's the guy that's been following her around in the first several episodes.
Yeah, which answers some of my questions. I've been wondering who that guy is this whole time. Yeah, I guess I even after watching the episode, I didn't put those things together until you pointed it out.
Yeah, he's wearing the fedora and he has on the same shirt. So it's the exact same clothes as what the guy with the blood running up his face has on. So
yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, for sure. So we can see after the book has been published that Anne's upstairs. She's reading the book. And when she finishes the book, she can see that her dad has dedicated the book to Rita and says that Rita is his laughing place. And this definitely doesn't sit well with Anne. She kind of starts talking to herself and mumbling to herself and walking around upstairs. It's late at night. Her dad gets up to kind of figure out what's going on. And she chucks the book at him, accuses him of essentially saying that, like, you're loving her more than you love me. And he's saying, no, like, I can love you both, essentially. And when he goes in to give her a hug.
She didn't help you write the book.
And I think that's a really good point, because how hard would it have been for him to just put them both?
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Did you run out of ink? Like,
yeah.
What was so hard about you writing both of their names in there? I don't understand why he didn't do that or foresee that being a problem.
And yeah, like, she typed up most of it. That child labor thing, you didn't even give her credit.
And she read most of it to him, which he said was like part of his inspiration was him being able to hear it through her own speaking it.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So after
He's
says
asking for it,
after he says that you can have more than one laughing place, he leans in for a hug. She pushes him away. He falls down the stairs and he gets impaled on the railing.
Brutal, man. Brutal. Do you think that was worse than the ice cream scoop in the gullet?
For sure. For me, this was really hard to watch. I think the hardest part of it was him just constantly being like, it's fine. It's fine.
Oh, yeah,
it's
man.
fine. And it's definitely not fine.
It's going to be okay. And she tries to lift him and
yeah. So There's a lot of blood too, like a lot of blood. So Rita comes out. She can see him impaled on the railing. She, of course, freaks out and she starts screaming like, "What did you do?" And Annie loses it and she grabs the scissors and says, "I thought you were good," and starts to go after Rita.
Yeah.
She stabs Rita, and then you see her kind of go in and grab the baby. We can see after a flash forward at that point that Joy's finished the novel, kind of back in real time.
Oh, right.
And we can see that the novel has been dedicated to Rita. So we don't know where that's going to go yet, but now Joy has some idea that Rita exists.
Yeah.
It's kind of trippy to see her almost like you're watching her get taken away and you're watching her find her, if she's still alive, in the same sort of vein, like at the same time.
Yeah, true.
So we flash back then to the very first scene of the first season where we can see Anne walking through the woods with the box that says the Ravening Angel on the side. And we can pretty much assume at this point that it's Joy that's inside the box.
You mean Evangeline?
Yes. So we get down to where the river is, and I think you can basically assume from the fact that Anne starts saying the words that her mom said before she drove into the river that Anne's going to drown the baby.
Yeah, she even says, quote, "I'm on your side."
Yeah.
While the baby's crying.
When there's a way we can get out of this, sort of deal. But then right before she goes to dunk the baby starts laughing. And then I think Anne really comes to the realization that the baby could be her laughing place. Hence why she named the baby Joy. And then that's why she decides to not drown the baby, because that, since you can have more than one, this can be hers.
Yeah.
So we flash forward to see that Anne has been drinking for a while, and Joy is busy Googling what appears to be her real mom, Rita. We then see that Rita has survived the stabbing. Still alive.
Yeah, she takes that deep breath. It's a flashback to the scene.
Yeah, she's got the scissors in her belly, and then she gasps for air.
Yeah, and you're like, ooh, what's going to happen?
Yep, it's going to go down.
Yeah.
We then see that Rita has actually survived, and then shortly right after that, that Ace pulls up to the bar next, and he pulls up a chair next to Anne. So this is last episode. We talked about this, or I said, I want to know, is Anne going to get a chance to be the redemption arc, or is Anne going to be one of the baddies and she's going to get body snatched? So now Ace is at the bar. He's right next to her. She's been drinking all day. Now he has his chance to body snatch her.
Yeah. So where do you think this is going to go?
I only think he wants the body snatcher because of the fact that he was trying to kidnap Joy. So clearly he wants one of the two of them, if not both.
Right.
So if that's otherwise, I mean,
do you think he has like a kind of a crush on her? Because he thinks he's like this tough guy and he got killed by her in a very quick fashion. And he's like, ooh.
That would be interesting.
Gives me the vapors.
Like, he knows that she can get shit done.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that. I wonder though, with him being the facilitator, it seems that, with her having the ability to get shit done, I'd want her on my team, especially if I'm going to go start killing people. She's apt to be pretty good at it. Or do you need her for some other reason? Are we just imprisoning her for revenge? Do we need her for some sacrifice or some ritual? I don't know.
Yeah, you have to think there's some reason that he's going to go back and sit next to her. Like, that's the person that killed him, and he finds her and sits down next to her at a bar.
I think this is where she gets body snatched, possibly, but we'll see.
Ooh, okay.
So Joy calls Rita. I don't know how she found her number. I guess it was on Facebook, right?
Yeah, it was like Facebook or LinkedIn or something similar.
And she's like, oh, don't call me or stop calling this number. And she's like, oh, wait, do you know about this book called The Ravening Angel? And Rita's immediately like, who's this? Yeah. And if you look behind Rita, you can see on the wall that there's like a map of the U.S. with a bunch of thumb pins in it. So it looks like she's clearly been looking for somebody for a while.
Yeah. Yep.
So I guess Anne then
could you imagine being in that place, like surviving that and then just wanting to find your daughter?
Oh, Man. Yeah.
That in its own right is an action movie waiting to happen. Everybody loves a good revenge flick.
Yeah, definitely. And it just makes me want to know where it's going to go from here for sure. So the episode ends basically at that point. I think it's interesting to see where this is going. This has definitely been the most visceral episode up to this point, to see what made Anne who she is. We never really got to see, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been so long since I've seen it, and I'll have to rewatch it at some point, but you don't really get to see what made Kathy Bates, do you? Like from the point that she's a little small child?
No, at one point, Paul Sheldon does find like a scrapbook that she has that has a bunch of newspaper clippings and different things that kind of paint a picture of her past.
Okay, but it's not portrayed so vividly.
No.
So 1 out of 10, what would you give this particular episode of Castle Rock?
This is an 8 for me. That it hits hard. It hit like a season finale almost. You know, you're getting answers to all these questions all at once, but it's only episode 5. So I'm super excited for the rest of the season at this point.
I would say it's about the same for me.
Okay.
I think this has probably been my favorite episode up to this point. If you were looking for horror, I think that it's not. You got shock, you got visceralness, you got a lot of blood, you got pretty much a lot of the things you could want in a horror flick in this particular scene. But I think that it's great because we've talked about this on several other things in the show. You know what's going to happen, but you don't know how. Yeah. And then when it happens, you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah. And through the first part of the season, as complex and hard of a character she is to like with the things that she's doing, you've become attached to Annie. And you're kind of rooting for her and rooting for Joy on a level. And this just slashes all those expectations down and brings you right back to like 0 on her.
Call me crazy, but I still kind of root for Annie because of the fact that she had no chance.
Yeah. And she didn't kill her dad on purpose.
It's not her. Yeah. She just shoved him away and then he fell the way he fell. But you know, I really have a hard time rooting against somebody that has just had it out for them from the start. Like if she was born into a different house there, I don't think she would have ended up being that person.
Yeah. Well, it seemed like she already had some issues, just behaviorally or.
I think it's pretty clear she's bipolar.
Yeah.
Because when you see her take the slash at Joy with the piece of glass, and then all of a sudden she's like, wait.
Yeah.
Like
she's like snaps back.
It's like that other half took back over again. So I think that's pretty clear that she's dealing with that. And I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm not sure what lithium is used to treat. But isn't that like used to treat bipolar sort of stuff?
Yes, yeah, pretty sure. It's just supposed to be one of those things that like levels you out.
So, I mean, we clearly have gotten the best episode of Castle Rock up to this point. Both of us are going to say we're going to give it 8s, which is great. I mean, coming off an episode where both of us gave it the lowest scores, now to come back with the one that's we've given the highest score up to this point. I don't know that we're going to get too many more episodes than 10. So up to 5 episodes into this point, where do you feel with it? Are you still around a 7, would you say?
Yeah. And I'm invested. I can't wait to see what transpires from here. Because I guess that's the point I was trying to make. These 5 episodes have been an investment, and then all of a sudden, like, all bets are off again. And we're back to 0. It's got me. It sucked me in.
Yeah, it gave you a lot of background, and it hit the reset button for sure, because it added a whole nother wrinkle to the story.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can see from the Hulu thumbnail, spoiler alert, episode 6, you can see for the thumbnail that Rita has made her way to the Stargazer Lodge. And so I really wonder, like, I'm really, 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 really excited to watch episode 6, and I want to see what happens for sure. So I'm definitely invested. I'm definitely sucked in. If you guys feel the same way, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe for all things Escape the Mind reviews. I have no clue where we're going to go with this next and what show we're going to cover after this, but I know I'm having a lot of fun with this. So I want to thank you, Solus, for joining me as always.
Awesome. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody at home for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you. Good night.